Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Here is a sound from the past. Do any of you recognize it? Yes, that strange sound was oftentimes some years ago heard by millions and millions of people, certainly all around the United States and North America and perhaps around the world. Do you even know what that sound is? Well, this is Stan Houston, and that's an interesting idea. And today I want to talk about a few of those interesting ideas, and I'd like you to participate. And so, even though you aren't doing it right now next to me in the studio, perhaps you'll do it as we kind of go along. This is Interesting Ideas, and the program begins right now. And a lot of things to talk about. Now, first of all, that sound. Well, you may hear it more often because I'm kind of an old-fashioned guy, and I've found that a lot of the great radio that was done in the past can be very helpful to those of us who are trying to employ the modern media of podcasting. Just because something is newer, never assume that it was better. And in terms of what we would call radio programming today, I would have to say that it is not very good compared to what it was when top professionals and people who really cared about the medium, and because there were not that many other outlets for talented expression, radio was a better deal and oftentimes a much finer product than it is today. Well, I'd like to talk about that. That sound, again, I'd love to hear from you. Some of you right now would say, Stan, I know what that was. Well, I'm not going to tell you right now, but I'd love to hear if any of you would tell me what it was. What was that sound? Okay, here it goes again. What was that sound? Well, today I have a subject which I would love to have you right next door to me right now. I'd love to have you on the phone. And by the way, that's possible today to do radio. You don't have to get in front of a microphone. You don't have to do a Zoom call. You don't have to do Skype. If you just have a telephone, a simple telephone, we can have you broadcast quality on our podcast radio program. The technology has gotten that much better. I oftentimes say if the talent could keep up with the technology, or if the technology could keep up with the talent, we'd have a good balance in the way we do our world today. But we don't ever quite get it right. But here's what I would love to talk to you about, okay? It's from an old cowboy movie. And perhaps you are familiar with some of the cowboy movies. And a lot of our work here at What It Takes Radio is working with the men and women, and I guess boys and girls, certainly oldsters, who have a real love, tradition for the cowboy experience, the cowboy way of life, the Western stories, the Western mythologies. And of course, it's coming back. What are some of the top programs television today? 1883, Yellowstone. Perhaps we're coming back to some of the appreciation, not only of the stories, but perhaps some of the heroics, and at the same time, some of the deep mysteries and tragedies of life that can come to us as we kind of explore that past cowboy experience and what that past cowboy experience and how it is expressed and even lived out by many people today. I love one of the, again, here's an interesting idea. She was featured in a cowboy magazine, Cowgirl magazine, and it was a story of a woman of the West, and she had it all, you know. She had the horse, she had the age, she had the experience, she had the charm, she had the toughness and all that went into that. And she was asked, well, you're quite a cowgirl. And she said, no, I'm a cowboy. No, she says, please keep in mind, cowboy has nothing to do with gender. Cowboy is a state of mind. And I'm a cowboy. Now, I'd love to talk to you about that. But here's what I want to talk to you about. It's from the movie The Magnificent Seven. Now, for those of you who don't know necessarily about it, it's a story where this town is trying to hold out, and there are the bad guys, and they are threatening that they're going to come down and take over this town and destroy it, or at least clean it up and make it over to their way, and their way is not the good way. Well, the story continues, and they're getting ready for the final standoff. And the leader of the group in the community is trying to rally all of the men and women to get ready to hold off this invasion of what will obviously be gunfire and obviously damage and property and possibly tragedy, but can they hold out? One of the leader's friends, who he had actually known from past days in the Civil War. And of course, a lot of the cowboy era came out of the fact that after the Civil War, there was a great deal of damage and hurt and pain and misery. And a lot of people said, let's start over. And they went west. And so it was the cowboys and the pioneers and the explorers who flooded the western part of the country because this was the time to seek new opportunities and new ways. And what happened was that he just couldn't handle it. She said, no, I can't handle it anymore. I'm leaving. I will not stay here. I'm out. I'm quitting. Saddles up on his horse, and then he utters that incredible line, which really struck me. And this is what I would say is an interesting idea. He says, please remember me as I was. Now let that sit on your head for a while. Please remember me as I was. Wow. You know, I'd like to talk about that because, and I wish you were here, because that could be not very good. But maybe it could be very good. Please remember me as I was. Hey, you are in tune with the program that's designed to help you be more interesting and, more importantly, interested in others. Please keep in mind that one of the real keys to success is to be interesting and to be interested in others, and then to explore that with an incredible, heightened curiosity. The people who live by those trinity of virtues will usually do better in the world. Again, just let it sit on your head for a while. Let's take a break, and we'll be back. Again, time for just a little shameless self-promotion. This program, Interesting Ideas, is just one of a number of modern media radio podcasts that we do. What It Takes Radio with me, Stan, and my colleague Sherry, who is also a producer of many Western genre podcasts. And she is now putting together a program on Tombstone. That's right. Tombstone Treasures and Stories. And she's just completed her second cookbook about cowboy stuff and cowboy food. And it's going to be Tombstone Treasuries of recipes. That's right. When you think of Tombstone and that famous OK Corral shootout, you probably haven't thought of the fact that Tombstone was a place where actually there was much more going on than just a gunfight. And it's a part of American history. And people who were living unique ways, and she's learned the history and has a cookbook for you. Stay on the lookout for it, and we'll talk more about it. She'll be on the program someday. Okay, I'm circling around all over the place, but here, let's go. Please remember me as I was. Well, first of all, that can be kind of sad, because what he's saying is, I was a better man. I was braver. I was bolder. I was stronger. But I'm not anymore. I'm less than I was. So please remember me as I was. Now, again, that has a mixed thing, doesn't it? One of my great friends in our church and our kind of retirement community in Saddlebrook, Arizona, I won't give her full name, but she knows who she is if she listens to it because it was so delightful. And she was talking about the fact that here we are, we're all in our 70s or 80s, and we're trying to make life happen at this stage in our encore of life. And her little smile said, yes, I keep saying to my children and their friends, hey, we weren't always old, sick, and poor. We weren't always that way. And of course, that's true. But there is a great deal to celebrate in the fact that, all right, we've changed. Hopefully there's still some greater wisdom. But yeah, please remember me as I was, as we were. And I have to remember that too, because I remember my dear wife as she was struggling, and it was a long struggle. Her father was wonderful, wonderful man. And a pastor for many years, and a real, almost a second father to me, maybe even more than my own father was. And toward the end of his life, it was riddled with Parkinson's. And I don't need to say anything more. And we had to keep reminding the children, and they got it, that rather crippled old man was not the man that he was. This was a man who decided to go into the ministry rather than take a opportunity to be a major league pitcher for the Chicago Cubs. And he was big, and he was strong, and he was tall, and even to the very end of his days when he could still watch the game on TV, he would oftentimes tell me what the strategy could have been or should have been to win the game. And you know what? He was almost always right. So it's really good, in some cases, for us to go back and remember what he was. And that can be helpful, and that can be good, and that can be right. And particularly for children to understand. And that's why it's good to bring out the old pictures and tell the old stories so that those people who are in what I would call this stage of life can remember and tell some of the stories of what it was like when they were young. Please remember me as I was. So I would like to say that's a very positive thing that we need to do. And I'd love to hear from you. Right now, could you tell me some stories of people who that could apply to? I've got to remember them as they were. I've got to remember them when they were at their greater physical power and maybe mental power and alertness. Don't let their present circumstance define in any way the image and the stories we have of them now. On the other hand, I think it could be positive in this sense, because we can then go and say, hey, remember me as I was, because now you can compare me with what I am. Hey, the man who was down on his luck, an alcoholic, and about ready to see his life fly away. As he said, I still remember the time when I was throwing up in the gutter. And literally, a mother and daughter walked around because they wanted to get away from me. And I was so embarrassed. But I want people to remember, that's where I was. Please remember where I was. Because now, see, by God's grace, what I've become. So remember me as I was. But also celebrate who I've become. So, again, remember me as I was. Well, that's 15 minutes of some thinking. I hope it would be helpful to you. And again, this is why I'm asking you to raise your hand and say, Stan, I would love to have been in the studio and talked with you about this subject. Now, you do have an interesting idea. You're full of interesting ideas. And I want you to reach out to me at stanhouston@gmail.com, stanhouston@gmail.com. And I want you to raise your hand and say, Stan, I have an interesting idea I'd like to share with you. And perhaps we can put it on the radio and have other people join in the conversation about interesting ideas. We'll be back. Well, there is more to that conversation. Please remember me as I was. I'd love to hear from you. So, as I said, let me know what your interesting idea is. I'm going to pass on to you some thoughts that we're going to do continuing on. As I said before on one of my handouts, since we are now in the Olympic time, I would like to talk about an incredible story where a man who had qualified to win a medal in the Olympics in skiing, but he had one more ski down that he had to go. And it turned out that he did just as well, but he fell out of medal contention. And his point was, don't feel sorry for me. Don't feel sorry for me. Now, there's an interesting story as to why he said that. And I'd like to tell you more about that in the next story on interesting ideas. But you have to come back. All right, there we go. Please remember me as I was, all of the lessons and all of the aspirations that might come from that. I'd love to hear from you. So, again, check us out. And also, you know what I'm going to say to you. This would be your way to have a sense of actually being on the radio yourself. And that's what Sherry and I are going to help you do in this modern area and era that says, in effect, if it's important, it needs to be heard, and in your life and in your business, you're going to have to get a platform to be able to perform and demonstrate your wisdom, insight, and truth. You're going to have to show that even if you're a plumber, that you're one of the best plumbers there is. And you can't find that out in the so-called old yellow pages or on a brochure or anything like that. You're going to have to learn how to be on the radio, be on the video, and use the modern media, not to hurt others, but it is to share wisdom and build relationships with others. So we'd like to help you do that. witradio.net, witradio.net. Thank you for your time. It's time for you to think about in 22 what you're going to do different, so that perhaps when 22 is all done, you'll actually be able to say, you know what? The year finished up. And guess what? I'm a little bit wiser, I'm a little bit smarter, and I'm a little bit better than I was. Bye for now.